Sunset, the leading and most trusted name in the do-it-yourself information field, presents Sunset Video, a complete line of home improvement video cassettes, over 20 project areas. Subjects include wiring, plumbing, carpentry, decks, flooring, kitchens, home repair, tile, paneling, painting and wallpapering, skylights, bookshelves, furniture refinishing, cabinets, and more. And each tape comes complete with a 16 to 48-page booklet that provides you with additional helpful information, as well as a list of tools and materials you will need.
This was the era of the original do-it-yourselfer. And in the early 19th century, doing it yourself wasn't an option, it was a matter of survival. And craftsmanship was the result of skill, finely honed by dire need. As you can see, a lot of these tools are real do-it-yourself items. For most families, and especially frontier families, competence in the crafts was not just a matter of economic necessity, it was also an important mode of self-expression. Besides providing the essentials like food, shelter, and clothing, craftsmanship also supplied much that was truly beautiful. The pioneer family, from the youngest toddler to the oldest graybeard, was no stranger to the idea of make it, make do, or do without. A person's livelihood, their social status, and even their prospects for becoming well-to-do was literally in their own hands, and quite dependent on the tools those hands could hold and use skillfully. Today, many people long for the kind of freedom, independence, and self-reliance that our forefathers enjoyed. I'm Kurt Burbick, and in the next half hour, Avian Rogers and I are going to show you what you need to know to use some of the most popular do-it-yourself tools. We'll demonstrate where, when, and how to use them properly, and we'll touch a little bit on safety, something even professionals can't stress enough. So let's join Avian.
The subject of tools is enormous. Anything that you use for a job can be considered a tool, whether it's designed for that task or not. So what we like to do are a few simple projects just as a way to show you some basic tools along with some techniques you would use on any number of projects in your own home. We'll follow a sequence. We'll start from tools that you would use at the beginning of a job to tools that you'd use at the very end. We'll talk about measuring tools and tools to level and plumb. We'll push on to cutting tools and other tools you would use to cut, shape, and trim wood. We'll look at some fastening tools and tools that you would use to put your projects together. And we'll finish with what else but finishing tools. So let's start now with measuring.
Anybody who's even done the simplest carpentry project around the house will find this familiar: measuring boards to cut them to the right size. Now we're going to be building a little bookshelf that we'll install in the entryway to the house a little later in the show. But whether you're doing a small project or a large one, we can't overemphasize that measuring accurately and carefully is all important in any building project.
Hi, Kurt.
Hi, Avian.
I'm going to go out back and I'm going to get the rest of the shelving material that we need to finish.
Okay, good. So let's take a minute and talk about this familiar object, the basic steel measuring tape. There's not much to it, but there's more than meets the eye. A lot of people will buy a smaller, thinner bladed tape like this, and it's fine for little jobs, but it really won't do for remodeling projects. It's got a problem. It's this. What you need to get is a tape with a wider blade, like this 1-inch version, so you can really stretch out to get some dimensions. Now, while a 16 or a 20-foot tape is sufficient for most remodeling projects, you can buy this style tape in up to 30-foot lengths. Now, the other thing I like about this sturdy tool is that you can measure heights without the use of a ladder by doing this. And you can even read the dimensions right off the tape up at the ceiling pretty easily. Now, a tape like this will last you a good long time if you'll just give it a little care. Now, all that means is, even though this blade is designed to bend, you don't want to kink the blade or put a twist in the metal. And avoid allowing the tape to slide back into the case like this unchecked, because over time that'll tend to either break or bend this hook on the end of the tape. Now, you can deal with that problem by using your finger on the back of the tape like this as a brake. And this particular manufacturer has designed a little rubber cushion in here to deal with that problem too. Now, if the hook gets bent or broken, you're not going to be able to take accurate measurements, so treat it with care. And one little thing about this hook, it's purposely designed with a little play in it. The amount of the play is equal to the thickness of the hook. The idea here is that you can do outside measurements or inside measurements. Now, another little point to remember is that when you're measuring inside something like this, you can do it in this fashion, and you then must add the dimension of the case to the tape to get the proper measurement. And that dimension is printed on the side of the case. So this tool is good for measuring all kinds of situations in home remodeling projects.
This is a versatile little tool. As its name suggests, it's called a combination square, and it's great for squaring the end of your board or getting a 45-degree angle for miters. Most of them have a little spirit level for a quick level check. And another little thing you can do with this combination square is if you need to make a mark running the full length of your board, say for ripping, which means cutting the long ways on your board, you can extend the blade just the dimension that you need from the 90-degree side of your tool, and then butt your pencil up against the blade to make your mark.
A couple of words you'll hear us using a lot in this series are plumb and level. Plumb simply means that a piece of material is absolutely vertical, and level means that it's absolutely horizontal. Now, a tool for checking these conditions is called a level, and it has a water bubble device in it so you can check levelness and plumbness. Now, every good do-it-yourselfer's workshop should have this 2-foot carpenter's level and a smaller spirit level.
Oh, not so fast. Come on back.
Okay.
Chalk line makes the job of transferring a straight line to a large area a lot easier. So here, why don't you put your stuff down?
All right.
And by pulling your chalk line between your 2 points of measurement, I've got a mark right down there, and then pulling it tight, snap your line to get your mark.
One more little thing about measuring, and that's actually about marking. Your steel tape has a cupped shape to it, which gives it that strength and rigidity we showed you earlier. But that same cupped shape, when you lay the tape down to measure, keeps the edge of the tape up off the material about 1/8 of an inch. So when you're ready to mark, roll the tape a little bit to the side so that the lines and your pencil are close to the material, and that'll give you a much more accurate result.
Another bit about history. Nature's level is calm, still water. And the pioneers used this fact to level their cabin sills. They would place a bowl of water there to check the accuracy of their work as it progressed. This example illustrates how many of our most useful and effective tools don't rely on high-tech sophistication, but on plain common sense.
Well, now that you're done measuring, you're probably ready to start cutting. And in most cases, cutting means sawing. Now, saws come in such an incredible variety of sizes and shapes that it's probably safe to say that there's a saw designed for every cutting purpose. Now, here's one of the most popular power tools in existence today. It's called a circular saw, and it's a perfectly safe and easy tool to use as long as you respect it. So before we turn you loose with this one, let's just take a look at some of the particular information about this tool.
Circular saws share a number of common features. A replaceable blade held in place by a fixing bolt. A blade guard, part of which is fixed and part of which is spring-loaded to swivel up and out of the way as you cut and then snap back once you've completed your cut and you pull away from your wood, as the blade will continue to coast down even after you've shut it off. Then a foot plate, which usually has a freehand cutting notch in the end, although I recommend that you follow the blade itself with your eye as you cut along your line. Then usually some adjustable knobs or wing nuts to adjust for the angle of your cut and also the depth. A little historical note. It was a woman, Tabitha Babbitt, who was a member of the Harvard Shaker community, who was credited with having invented the first circular saw blade in 1810. Now, the first bit of advice that I can give you is to make sure that you use the right blade for the kind of job that you're doing. This one here is a combination blade. But when I say right kind of blade, I don't mean just the blade for a given material or the type of cut that you want, but that your blade be sharp and clean. Now, if you're cutting and you encounter increased resistance or the wood is actually smoking, this is a definite signal that it's overdue to change your blade. But don't, under any circumstances, ever change your blade with your saw plugged in. Now, before you actually begin your cut, set the depth of your cut so that the bottom of the tooth of your saw extends just a little bit more than the thickness of your wood. To further control your cut, you want to position your board comfortably, like we have across these sawhorses. Also, the main weight of the board is fully supported, and the scrap end runs clear so that the waste can fall away from your blade, thereby reducing the risk of binding or torquing. Now, to start your saw, rest the end of your base plate on your wood so that the blade will run free. If you don't, the teeth of the blade could catch on the wood and cause the motor to stall out. Now, to avoid the risk of binding when you're actually cutting, keep your base plate running flat on the surface of the wood and cut as straight a line as possible. That's one reason when you're measuring, you want to draw your line so that it's clearly legible. Now, if for any reason at all your blade does bind, turn the motor off immediately and refer to your owner's manual. Now, we're ready to cut, so I want to plug the saw in. Put on my safety goggles. Engage the saw, and we're ready to roll. Now, if you have to make a really long cut, like cutting the length of a board, that's often referred to as ripping. And there's a lot of room for inaccuracies built in there. So it's a great idea to take a batten or some other kind of straight edge and clamp it or temporarily nail it to the board to act as a cutting guide.
Here's another very popular power tool. It's called a jigsaw. As you can see, it's used for making curved cuts in wood. And this jigsaw, like many, are able to do scroll cuts also. Now, there are other kinds of power saws. Reciprocating saws, band saws, and table saws come to mind as types you might encounter as a do-it-yourselfer. A reciprocating saw is basically a demolition tool, used for creating openings for windows and doorways, or to cut part of a wall out to create an archway. Now, no discussion of saws would be complete without mentioning hand saws. There are lots of handsaw types available today, each specifically designed to make a given cutting job easier, cleaner, or more efficient. So no matter what kind of saw you're shopping for, if you stick with a reputable manufacturer, you can't go wrong. Now, there are lots of hand drills available, but in general, the 3/8 is probably so popular because it's so versatile. When shopping for one, look for the variable speed trigger. That with the reversing switch makes this an extremely useful tool. Now, there's also a heavy-duty cordless drill, which can double as a screwdriver. No hand or power drill is going to be any better than the drill bit that we put in the chuck. So we'd like to talk about 3 kinds of drill bits used with woodwork. First, there are high-speed bits, which can also be used for drilling metal. They're generally used for holes 1/4 inch diameter and smaller. Now, for the middle range of hole sizes, 1/4 inch to 2 inch diameter, we'll use what's called a spade drill bit. Then for the larger holes, 2 inch diameter and above, we can use this hole saw. Like power saws, electric drills require good safety habits. For example, don't forget to remove this key from the chuck when you're done installing a drill bit. In fact, it's a good idea to position this key down at the end of your electric cord. That way you'll be reminded to unplug this when you're changing a drill bit. And before you start drilling, always check to see that this drill bit is centered properly in the chuck and is positioned right, and you do that slowly. Now this one's okay. Now the material you're going to be working on, of course, has to be securely clamped down before you start drilling in it. And when you start drilling, check the positioning of your drill with the material to make sure the angle's proper. When you're drilling a particularly deep hole, back that drill out as you're going through that drilling process to clear some of the shavings from the hole. Now this drill tool is an extremely versatile tool. It comes with several attachments that make it into other tools in a sense, like this disc sander attachment, or the grinder attachment, or this screwdriver head attachment. So let's take a look at some basic and essential tools, the kind you'd use to actually put a project together.
Once you've measured, cut, and shaped your materials, you've made significant progress. But then there's time to put it all together. You'll probably be using either hammer and nails, or screws and screwdrivers, maybe glue with the help of clamps. Now, in regards to our discussion on hammers, Kurt, tell us the difference between a claw hammer and a ripping hammer.
Well, just that. A claw hammer curves, as you can see. The claws on a ripping hammer are straight. They're designed to stick in between boards and pull them apart when you're working on the demolition portion of a project.
What about all the handles?
Well, there are a lot of choices there, too. Red hickory is a traditional one. It's a strong and resilient kind of handle. You can also get steel or fiberglass handles. There's some other things about hammers that you've got to make some decisions about. The kind of head, for example. You can get what's called a checkerboard head, and that's used in the heavier hammers for framing processes. That's so this head won't slide off the top of a nail when you're driving it in. But for most finish work, you want to use a smooth head. Now, you can also get different weights with the hammers. 16 ounce, 20 ounce, even 22 ounce. So basically what you'll do is you'll make your decision based on what feels comfortable for you and what you find works and is safe.
Many times when you're nailing your projects together, like this squeaky stair tread, you'll have nail heads where you don't want them to show. So a way to deal with that is to set them below the surface of the wood with a handy tool like this called a nail set. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to take a finish nail and drive it into the tread so that it goes down into the riser. Now I stop nailing so that the head is protruding slightly from the surface of the tread. And I'll take my nail set and drive it down so that it's actually a 1/16 or an 1/8 of an inch below the surface of the tread. Then I take a little bit of wood dough and fill that hole. Then once that's dry, I'll come back around with some sandpaper and wipe away the excess.
Keep a bottle of carpenter's glue handy when you're fastening boards together. It sands easily and it really adds to the strength of wood connections. Now you'll be using other special adhesives for things like drywall, paneling, and flooring, and we'll demonstrate that in other shows. But if you're working with projects like cabinets or this set of shelves we've been building, glue is really essential.
Now, using screws means using a screwdriver of one type or another. And screwdrivers are one of the most self-explanatory tools in existence. They're either flathead or Phillips head, and they come in different sizes and lengths depending on what your needs are. There's even such a thing as a cordless screwdriver. Now you probably want to avoid the cheapest screwdrivers since they can strip out under stress. This is a Phillips head bit, and obviously it goes to a Phillips head screw. This type of screw lends itself very well to being driven by a power drill. Because of its embedded cross-headed slot, it reduces the odds of slippage as you drive your screw into place.
Hey, Avian, can I use that a minute?
Oh, yeah. Be great. Well, so much for getting it all together. Now let's move on to finishing tools and materials focusing especially on the sanding and smoothing process to get that finished professional look.
Sanding goes a long way back. It's an Old Testament process. The Hebrews refer to a stone called a shamir as being specifically used for smoothing and grinding. Now, almost all stripping, sanding, and finishing jobs can be done with a piece of sandpaper and an applicator, like a sanding block. And then there are the power tools, like a disc grinder and a belt sander and an orbital sander. Now, the disc grinder and the belt sander are used for rough work, like taking down rough boards, removing rust, or chipped paint, where the orbital sander is used strictly for finish work. Now, let's take a look at the process. Ever been confused by the different grades of sandpaper? Typically, you start with a coarser grade and work your way down to finer and finer papers. 40 is considered coarse, 150 fine, and 600 very fine. Now, when you begin your finish work, here's one of the most popular power tools for the do-it-yourselfer, an orbital sander. It's great for finishing large flat surfaces like our bookshelf here, or for a piece of flat trim. Now, you can buy pre-cut strips of sandpaper for this tool, or you can save yourself some money and cut your own strips from larger sheets. When doing your finishing work, if you're doing it by hand with your block sander, always remember to sand in the direction of the grain of the wood to get a smoother result. But because your orbital sander is designed so that the sanding face moves in a circular motion, that allows you to use this tool and move it in any direction. Now, because sanding is kind of messy, you may want to use a dust mask. And if you're using your belt sander, which can really kick up a lot of dust, you may also want to use a pair of safety goggles. Now we want to remove some paint drips from this baluster post. If you clamp a piece of straight wood flush with the corner, you'll prevent rocking the sanding block, and you'll get a nice sharp corner as a result. Putting felt or almost any spongy material like this rag behind the sandpaper will help you get a consistent, smooth, rounded surface, so you'll avoid putting any flatness in this part of the banister. Use what's called a sanding cloth for sanding carved and rounded pieces like these on our staircase. We could give sanding more attention. It's a big, important subject that deserves more time than we have to give it here, so we'll move on.
We hope these brief demonstrations have given you something of a flavor of the do-it-yourself experience. Not only will good quality tools save you time and money, but they're safer to use. Of course, good tools make a difference, but so does a do-it-yourself attitude, the feelings of self-reliance and self-confidence that you gain from an independent approach to things.
Building a house like this one is a complicated piece of construction. There's the foundation, the framing, the siding, the roofing, the flooring, and the electrical. In fact, everything we've covered in our series up till now, or will cover in future programs. Now, I'll bet you're thinking this all sounds quite complicated, but there is a building project that involves almost all these elements that 2 to 3 people can complete in a period of 6 to 10 weekends.
It sure looks like a big job, doesn't it? Well, it is. But the important thing to know is that it's made up of many small steps accomplished one at a time.
Before we go any further, let's take a look at the tools we'll need for this part. First, we'll need a couple of hammers, a measuring tape, at least 33 feet long, a combination square, a 4-foot-long level, a nail pulling tool, a staple gun, a circular saw, a chalk line or string, a couple of sturdy ladders, and some pencils. And this, of course, which is optional. Morning. Well, we're getting a nice early start on this first day of construction.
Well, we've got everything we need: tools, materials, plans, great weather.
At least for today, anyway.
Well, and for a project of this size, we thought we'd get a little extra help, too.
I guess. Good morning.
Yeah.
Kurt. Good morning, Avian.
Hey, Ron.
Hi, Ron.
Well, obviously, you can still use an extra hand.
You bet.
Are you sure you shouldn't have someone down here with a little bit more experience?
Not at all. This kind of a project just requires preparation, some common sense, and the willingness to do a little hard work.
Ron, this weekend we're working on framing. We're building the walls and the roof to our garage.
These pieces are called studs, and the long pieces we've cut are the plates. Each wall has a top and a bottom plate.
What do they do?
Well, they form the bottom and the top of the wall. I think it'll become more clear when we start building the walls.
I see. Okay. Sure.
We'll work right here. See, the nice thing about building a garage is the concrete slab creates the perfect work surface.
These things want to be on 12-inch centers, not 16.
Well, so we'll start with this wall, though.
Sure.
There we go. See, we want to line the stud up with these marks at the top and bottom plates like this.
Right, but how did you know where to make these marks?
Well, before you got here this morning, Ron, Kurt and I laid out the top and bottom plates and made our marks. We measured in and made a mark exactly 3/4 of an inch from the edge. Then we moved the end of the tape and put it on that mark. And we measured and marked at 16-inch intervals along both plates. Then we put an X on the side of the marks where our studs are going to go.
All right, I've got all that, but I'm not quite sure why we have this 16-inch spacing.
Okay, Ron, the reason for the 16-inch spacing is so that the studs will be in the right position when we nail on the sheathing. See, each sheet is 4 feet wide, and it's very important that the edge of each sheet center on a stud, so that when we nail 2 sheets side by side, each edge will have something to nail into. Come on down here and let me talk about the 3/4 inch space at the end. The reason that we started out with a 3/4 inch space before we started laying out our 16-inch spacing is so that the studs would be properly aligned for the sheathing.
Now, local codes will specify the maximum allowable distance between the studs, and some codes will allow 24-inch on center, but most require 16-inch centers.
Now, these 3 stud corners, as they're called, have to do with providing nailing for finished materials on the inside of the garage. But Avian's going to explain more about that later.
All right, good.
Now, these are pre-cut studs. You can buy these at any lumber yard. They're already cut to the proper height for standard height walls, and they're a great convenience. Now, you cut your plates and your other pieces from dimensions on your blueprints. And when cutting your plates, be sure to select the material from the straightest lumber. And when you do that, sight down the board so you can place the crown or the bow up.
Okay, now that we've got the wall laid out on the horizontal, the next step is to nail it together using 2 16-penny nails at each joint.
Okay, that sounds easy enough.
You guys mind if I find a little music we can work to?
Nice choice of music, Kurt.
Thank you. Now, before we can lift this wall into place, we have to check it for squareness. We measured the diagonal of our wall from one corner to the other. Now we're measuring this diagonal, and we've discovered that the dimension is the same, so we know that our wall is square.
Then we nail a temporary 2x4 brace across the wall on a diagonal, and we're ready to raise the wall.
Is this all we need, just one brace?
Yes, this is enough of a brace to keep it square until we can raise it.
Let's see.
All right, let's put her up.
All right.
Okay, you got it, Ron?
Got it.
All right, now while Avian makes sure the wall is plumb or perfectly vertical, I'll nail this temporary brace in place.
See, and we don't ever have to remove any of the braces until we have all the walls up and plumb.
Okay, has that got it?
Looks good.
There's one wall up.
Well, that wasn't so hard. Only 3 more walls to go.
Sounds like you know what we're doing. Let's keep rolling.
We've got our 16-inch spacing already laid out on our plates, but look, we're going to have a new procedure coming here.
Well, it looks like we have to frame for a door. How do we handle that?
Well, take a look at your plans and find the dimension from the edge of the wall to the center line of the door. See here it says 3 foot 6 inches?
I see. Then we measure in from the edge and we make a mark.
Right. Let's mark the center line on our plate. Then all we'll need is our rough opening dimension.
Wait a minute. What is a rough opening?
Well, that's a dimension that indicates the location of the framing members so that when we frame this wall up, we'll have an opening big enough to accept our door unit. And that dimension is normally about 2 inches bigger than our door size.
How do we find out that size?
You get it from the door manufacturer. Then you take half the rough opening width and mark it on your plates. Then you mark your line, putting a double X on the outside of that line, which indicates the location of the double king studs, so that when we frame this wall, we'll have an opening width large enough to accept the door size.
Okay.
These 2 double sets of studs are our king studs. They define our door's rough opening width. We've nailed them into place on the plates where we just made our marks. Now I'm measuring and marking the rough opening height of the door. And for most doors, that's a standard 6 foot 10 inches above the slab.
Kurt, you mind if I choose the music this time?
Hey, Avian, that was good choice of music.
Thank you.
What's this for?
Well, across the top of our door opening, we call this thing that you built a header. It's made up of 2 2x6s with this 1/2-inch plywood spacer in the middle.
Yes, but why the spacer?
Well, that's so that our header will be the same thickness as our 2x4 studs.
Oh, I see. You know, most of this stuff is just plain basic common sense.
Right. See, then with these special metal fasteners, we'll use these to attach the header to our king stud. So bring it down into position here. Then we'll take our metal fastener, wraps around the king stud, place it on our marks, and then slide the header into the saddle of the fastener. Great. Now we'll nail it all together. I've got some special nails. Let me give them to you, Ron. There you go.
Thank you.
Nail into all these holes here in the fasteners.
What I did was measure the distance between the header and the top plate so I could cut these cripple studs and toenail them into place.
What do you mean, toenail?
Well, that simply means putting the nail in at an angle like this. That's it.
Does that mean we can raise the wall now?
We might as well. Avian, can we have a little music? These foundation anchors, which we put in every 5 feet around our building, literally hold the building to the concrete slab. They're really easy to work with. You just fold these metal straps on top of the sole plate and nail them in. No drilling or wrenches are required, as with the old anchor bolt system.
Now the way we fasten our walls together is we drive several nails into the stud end of this wall into the corner of this wall. Now remember our 3-stud corner? We had 2 full-length studs with 2x4 spacers in between. The reason we do that is should we ever decide to finish the interior of our garage, we'll need something to nail the edge of our sheetrock into right here in the corner.
We're in the middle of framing up our 3rd wall. It'll be different than the first two walls in that it has 2 windows and no doors. But the process for framing is just the same. That is, you begin by cutting and marking your top and your bottom plates for the 16 inches on center stud spacing. Then you lay your plates on the slab and you locate and nail in your pre-cut studs, as we've done here. Now, we've left 2 large spaces for our 2 window locations. And the way you locate the window is the same way you locate the door. That is, you measure over from the edge of the wall to the center line of the window location. Then you measure each way from that to the rough opening width of your window, and that will locate your 2 sets of double king studs on each side, here and over here. When they're nailed in place, you can install your window header. It's made the same way as a door header, and it's located in the same position, 6 foot 10 inches from the slab. Now, the window header is held in place with metal connectors, just like we used for the door header, and they'll hook the header to the double king studs. When they're nailed up, you put the smaller cripple studs at the top like this. Now, when that's in position, you can measure down from your window header to locate your window sill, which is a single 2x4. It goes in horizontally and is held in place again with a couple of metal connectors like these. Then, when that's nailed in place, we'll fill in the space at the bottom with 2 short cripple studs. And that's all there is really to framing up a window. Well, I guess we're ready to nail this stuff in place.
Framing the opening for our garage door took a little more thought than framing our other walls. Because we've got such a long span, we need a very large header to support the weight of the building. Basically, the wider the opening, the bigger the header. Well, one problem is our header is so tall that we don't have room for a top plate. Also, if we frame the wall on the horizontal concrete slab, it would be too heavy to raise in the typical way. So what we did is we built the 2 ends separately, adding these support studs or trimmers to hold the weight of the header. We've got this one nailed into place, and Ron's nailing this one in over here in the same way that we joined all the other walls. How's it going, Ron?
Just about got it, Avian.
Good. Well, once he's got this buttoned down, then we're ready to hoist the header into position, lifting one end at a time.
Now that we've got this end of the beam up, I've tapped in these temporary cleats to hold it in place before we try lifting the other end. This, by the way, is a special pressure-treated header called a laminated wood beam. It's made for extra long spans like a garage door, and you can get them in any lumber yard.
Notice how the header is cut longer than the size of our rough opening so that it sits on top of our trimmer studs. You know, there's nothing more frustrating than cutting your header the size of the rough opening, lifting into place, only to find that it's too short. But that's a common mistake. Well, now that we've got the walls up, we're ready to put on the cap plate. Ron? The cap plate goes on top of the top plate, all the way around the building. The important thing about the cap plate is that you overlap the joints at the corners, and this will aid in the overall stability of your building.
We've plumbed this last wall and added our temporary brace.
Well, this ought to do it for our first weekend.
Boy, where did all the time go? And doesn't this look great? Did we really do all this?
Not bad for one weekend.
No kidding.
Well, Kurt, we should take this plastic and cover up our materials so they stay nice and dry until next weekend.
Right. Ron, thanks a lot for your help.
Oh, don't mention it, Kurt. I'll see you next weekend.
Thanks, Ron. So
Bye now.
long. Oh, hey, Ron.
Hi.
Hi, Evie. Hi, Kurt. What are we going to do this weekend?
Well, we're going to install the roof framing and sheathing.
Hey, that sounds hard.
Yeah, and it would be, Ron, if we had to cut and assemble our own trusses. But fortunately for do-it-yourselfers, there are some other options that make it easier. These are called prefabricated roof trusses, and most lumber yards and material supply centers have them in standard sizes for garage roofs. It so happens that our garage roof isn't a standard design, so we had these made to order. What we'll be building is called a hip roof, and while there are lots of styles we could have chosen, we wanted one that would match our house.
I see.
And Ron, it's a principle that's carried even further in something called the pre-cut garage kit, which is relatively new in the home building scene. The idea is that the do-it-yourselfer can buy all of the materials for the garage in one package. The studs, the top and bottom plate, the rafters and gables and so on are all precision cut at the factory. It's an option that lies somewhere between having somebody build the garage for you and doing it yourself from scratch.
The first thing we needed to do was measure and mark the location of our trusses. We use the same principle we use in laying out our walls. One difference is the trusses are on 24-inch centers, though, rather than 16. Now, the design of our roof is called a hip roof, which means the ends slope just like the sides do. We want to make sure that the hips are even at both ends. So in doing our layout, we start at the center and measure out. Now, we're just putting up the last of the rafter ties here, and they go right at the marks. And once they're all in place, then we simply slide the trusses into the slot that this creates. This is my last one, and we'll be ready to go.
All right, we want to get our first truss in place. What we want to do is get this end up on the double top plate.
I gotta clear this in. Okay.
Can you lift that up there?
Okay, well, over one more. Yeah, there we go.
Okay, push the point up.
Great. Okay.
All right. Lift it in.
Okay. Great.
Ron, you know, it's important to get these first two full trusses, called common trusses, absolutely plumb, because they're going to set the tone for the shape of the rest of the roof. All right, we're ready for that next truss.
Okay.
Ron,
Okay,
maybe you can give her a hand there.
Sure.
I've got it in here. If you raise that up, that'd be great. And I'll tack it in down here. Okay, now we can toenail it in up there and over here.
Right.
After we got the full-length common trusses into place, we added this hip ridge and finished off our whole roof system. So now we're ready to put up the roof sheathing. Okay, guys. Now I'll grab it as soon as you get it up here far enough.
Okay, got it?
Okay, good, yeah. Be careful now. Okay, now we need to move it over, right over this rafter. Well, now we're starting to install the second course of our sheathing, and we added this 2x4 ledger for safety. And I'm tacking in these little plywood clips along the horizontal edge to give us more support when we don't have any wood. Okay, so let's slide this in, Ron. Over a little bit. Good, good. Now, another thing that's important when installing 4x8 sheathing is to stagger your joints. We've got a joint here and a joint over here, so we never have a continuous line running all the way up a rafter, which will add to the strength of your roof system.
I'll use this snap line to make a chalk mark on my sheathing so I can cut off the loose ends of this paneling. I'll start down here at the edge of the roof, work up the line all the way to the peak. Using my circular saw, setting the blade to the proper depth, and remembering to wear my safety goggles. I'll also use these toe boards for safety as I climb up the roof.
last step of this phase of our garage building project. What I'm doing is I'm stapling roofing felt to the sheathing of our roof. The roofing felt acts as a weatherproof skin underneath the shingles we'll be putting on later. I'm rolling it out as smoothly as I can where I started at the bottom. With each consecutive course, I'm sure to overlap the edges until the entire roof is covered.
Just made it, huh?
Boy, no kidding.
I just used these strips of lath to tack down the seams in the roofing felt. Now it won't get blown away before next weekend.
Great. Well, that's part one. Now we've got a sturdy shelter to store our materials under until we do the finishing work in part two.
And we're nice and covered up, so in case it starts to rain like it is now, we won't be in any trouble.
Well, I better make it home before it gets worse.
Hey, Ron, thanks a lot for all your help.
Yeah, thanks a million.
Enjoyed it. See you next weekend.
Great.
Right.
Goodbye. Good morning.
Hey,
Hi,
hi,
Ron.
Ron.
This weekend it's my turn to bring over the coffee.
Well, thank
Great.
you. How nice.
What are we going to do today?
The first thing we're going to do is we're going to put up this wall sheathing over the open frames.
All right.
It's very much like paneling or drywall, which we've covered in other programs.
Ron, why don't you give me a hand with this sheet of
Sure.
sheathing? Let's move it over. Great. When starting to hang sheathing, you want to start in the same corner you measured out from when locating the studs. Our studs are 16 inches on center, which is standard, so that we know at every 48 inches, or 4 feet, which is the same width as this sheet, there's a stud. In this way, the edge of the sheathing falls over the center line of the stud, so we always have something to nail to. Now, we put these starter nails right here so that when Ron and I lift our sheet into position, we can quickly tack it in and maintain that position. Now, let's raise it up. Okay. How's it look on your end?
Looks good.
Now, before we tack it in, I'm going to make one quick check to see whether it's plumb. And it looks very good. Okay, you got your hammer? Let's
Got it.
tack it in.
Okay, now let's get it tied up against that other edge.
All right, from the bottom.
Okay?
All right.
All right, now you press this up tight against the studs. I'll go in the inside and mark the window opening with my pencil. Then with my circular saw, I can just follow that pencil line and cut out the window shape. Bring it down a little bit here on this
Oh,
one.
I
Okay,
see.
let me
All
get one in.
Avian, what do we do about this crooked stud?
Oh, that's easy, Ron. Let me show you. I'm going to take this nail and tack it into the edge of the sheathing like this. Now, if you push against that stud until it lines up, that looks good.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
And that ought to hold it.
Good.
Ron, another important thing about nailing the sheathing is the nail should be spaced 6 inches along the edges and 12 inches on the middle studs.
Okay.
As with the roof, we're covering up the sheathing with this building paper. It acts as a waterproof membrane. It goes on first before the windows and doors get installed, and as you can see, you start at the bottom working up. You want to have an overlap here at the edges of about 2 inches. You can just hold the stuff on the siding with some staples. That works fine.
Okay, you guys, we're ready to install the windows.
That sounds even more complicated.
No, it's not complicated at all. We did the hard part when we built the framing. But before the development of these pre-hung windows, it used to be hard. But now with these recent developments, a novice do-it-yourselfer can do it. See, they're fully self-contained. It comes with the jamb, of course, the glass and the windows, even the trim. And they come in a variety of sizes. So since our opening is finished, we just lift this whole unit up into position. Great. Oh, Mr. Kurt, you want to check for level?
Right. Well, this is right on. It's perfectly level. If it wasn't, we'd probably take a shim like this to get it level on one side or the other.
Okay, well, the next thing to do is to put up the felt paper weatherproofing. So let's pull it out just a little bit. Whoop, scared me there for a second. You got it?
Yeah.
Okay, then we take this strip of tar paper and stick it up underneath. Make sure that it gets up, that it's touching the sill there. Now another thing to take note of is to put your factory edge up against your window. So we've got the bottom piece on first. Next piece that goes on are the sides so that it overlaps this bottom piece back behind the trim. Okay. We'll staple this into place. And then after Ron gets this side in, the last piece will go across the top, overlapping these flaps. Well, that's the last nail. We had pre-drilled the hole so the nails went in pretty smoothly. We finished putting up the tar paper. Then once we put up the finished siding, we'll caulk around that joint between the trim and the siding itself. So now we need to go put in the door, and that about does it for the window.
While we were framing this wall and tilting it into place, it was important to leave this sole plate in to give the wall strength. But now that the wall's been strapped to the foundation and we're ready to install the door, we need to cut out this section of sole plate. Now we need to check the slab for levelness. It looks pretty good.
Got it?
Yep.
Let's put the bottom in first. Great. Beautiful. Kurt, you want to remove the hinge pins and we'll take the door off.
Yeah.
Okay, we want to get it all the way up against there.
Okay.
That's good.
You got it?
Get it at the top. Okay, I'll hold it in while you staple. There we go.
Now that this door has been plumbed and securely fastened into place, we're ready to begin installing our door hardware. I'll put this doorknob in the pre-drilled hole and screw it together with the parts from the other side. For extra security, we want to install a deadbolt. Now we ordered the door with these holes pre-drilled, which makes this part of the job quite easy.
I think that's about as far as we're going to get this weekend.
We sure got a lot done.
Yeah, the building still looks a little strange, but we got the sheathing up and the felt paper and installed the windows and doors. Not bad for a barn raiser.
Right, and I've learned a lot, and it's been fun, too.
Are you going to be back next weekend?
You bet I am.
Great.
Great. Well, thanks for your help. We'll see
Glad
you
to do
then,
it.
huh?
See you later.
In this phase of our building, we're putting the siding up now.
We're applying a kind of siding known as board and batten.
So it'll look like the house, right?
Exactly.
Other typical kinds of siding that you might use are stucco, shingles, or full sheets of plywood.
But board and batten siding has a very pleasant appearance. We're not using the classic style of board and batten with solid wood vertical boards. We're using these sheets of plywood. Now we have to be careful in this case that the seams of these finished sheets don't line up over the seams of the sheathing underneath.
After we have our plywood put up, then we put the vertical battens 12 inches on center, matching the house using 4-penny galvanized nails.
Well, that really looks good.
Okay, that looks good. For safety, we went with a contractor to install our large, heavy garage door. Besides, after putting up the garage, we needed a break.
It's very important that the tracks on each side of the door are parallel from top to bottom.
When the last panel's in place, he can put in the overhead sections of the track.
He attached the overhead sections of the track to the vertical sections, and he was done.
Hey.
Oh! Contractor!
All right.
Contractor! Oh, Tom, we really enjoyed your performance. Really enjoyed it. Hey, we got to get started painting this thing now.
We sure do.
Right.
Sunset Home Improvement videos are specifically designed to work with Sunset Books, the most extensive library of do-it-yourself project information, with over 80 titles in home improvement and repair, decorating, and outdoor building. Sunset Books provides you with planning and design information, project plans, examples of completed projects, and detailed step-by-step instructions that were thoroughly tested by Sunset's experienced staff of building writers and editors. Sunset Books and Sunset Video together will give you the project ideas and building know-how you need to successfully complete your projects.